The Emma Watson J.K. Rowling drama is escalating to a head, and before you start this video and say, Emma Watson, J.K. Rowling, why do I care? You should care. You do need to care, because this is indicative, so indicative of what our society looks like at the moment and the importance behind standing behind voices of reason and supporting them and calling out people who tend to be a little bit idiotic, let I just say. And boy, oh boy, has J.K. Rowling giving it to Emma Watson. And if you don't know the drama, have no fear. We're going to break it all down for you. But first, have you liked, commented, and most importantly, subscribed? You already know the drill. 85% of you haven't subscribed. And we need to get that number up to get the message out. And if you love the merch behind us, that cup, as you know, I made it, meirak.com. Go check it out. And more importantly, we have just launched our newsletter, meirak.news. meirak.news. Put in your email address and we will send you the most important updates on Israel, Zionism, everything that's happening that you want to know directly to your inbox. But first, or second, let us discuss what is going on. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with who Emma Watson is, J.K. Rowling wrote the most amazing book, in my opinion, of all science fiction time, because the Bible is much better, obviously, Harry Potter. And I, for one, was obsessed as a child. I was always compared to Hermione, as you could probably imagine. Something to do with the curly hair, the buck teeth, the English accent, and the know-it-all personality. Me and Hermione, we just had an affinity for each other. You get what I'm saying? And I fell in love with Emma Watson because she was just beautiful. And I don't know, everything about her, I could watch her and talk about her and look at her for years as a teenager and as a young kid. I read Harry Potter hundreds of times without an exaggeration, and I was totally blown away by this. But with time, it became clear that Emma Watson's beauty kind of ended with her brain cells. And J.K. Rowling was actually the much more intelligent person in the story. Now, I have to say, there are not a lot of people who will get me starstruck, but I can honestly say that on the top of that list is J.K. Rowling. I love her and I love everything she stands for. But over the last few years, she has gained a huge amount of, shall I say, infamy and backlash because she has decided to make it her war to stand up for women's rights. Now, if you were to look J.K. Rowling up, you would think that actually she's transphobic, etc. She's not transphobic. That's what they've tried to make you believe. She's actually just somebody who thinks that it's important to protect the rights of women. And as we've all kind of discovered over the last few years, the whole trans movement is really an eradication of women, right? You put trans women in sports, that's men competing with women, so women can't win. You put trans women in bathrooms, that's women being violated by men in their bathrooms, right? And she has stood up for this to massive condemnation, not just internationally from the left wokey movement, which is kind of dying out as people realize, oh my god, JK might have been correct. She was correct about Harry Potter, and she's correct about this. But most importantly, from some of the Harry Potter cast, namely Emma Watson. Emma Watson came after J.K. Rowling for the last 5, 6, 7 years. Came after her. I am talking nasty comments, tweets, interviews. She's just been like, I can't have anything to do with that woman, blah, 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 blah. Okay? I don't actually know if she said that, but it became very clear that Emma Watson and Daniel Radcliffe, may I just add, distanced themselves extremely from her opinion. And they did that for one reason, and one reason only, in my opinion, to pander to the lefty mentality, okay? Not out of, I don't know, truthfulness. And maybe it was well-intended, but Emma Watson became this massive champion of transgender rights and children transgender rights. And such insanity, such a lefty, so unbelievably frustrating to listen to. And she betrayed J.K. Rowling in that. J.K. Rowling, who provided her the entire infrastructure for her fame, for her everything, she turned her back on her. Now, Emma Watson hasn't really been in the public sphere for very long. Not for very long. She hasn't really come out and done any interviews. And 2-3 days ago, she did this big podcast, okay, with Jay Shetty. And it was a very big deal because she's never really appeared on a podcast. And as we know, lately it's become more of a thing that celebrities try and kind of humanize themselves. So they go on podcasts and talk shows to kind of present not like a curated version of them that you see in the movies, but rather who they actually are. And so Emma Watson goes on this interview, and obviously, she can't help but say something anti-Israel. Okay, so we'll start with that. Ugh, so boring.
Palestine. The former Israeli UN ambassador, Danny Danon, called you an anti-Semite, and his tweet said, 10 points from Gryffindor for being an anti-Semite. What goes through your mind when you see that?
This happened a few years ago now.
Yeah.
I think what concerned me at the time was the way that that label was being used. And I think even now, I see that playing out where people don't feel like they can talk about what's happening safely. This duality created where we don't seem able to care about the victims of terrorism and care about the genocide that's happening in Palestine at the same time.
Okay, so as you can see, it's like a very pandery interview. You know, it's supposed to be very like, I'm this amazing person. I'm this amazing person. Now, when I say that she has been dragged to living hell after this interview, she has. And here's why. Okay? Because instead of just kind of, I don't know, talking about herself and her personality and her struggles, she decided that now that the tides have a little bit turned and people like J.K. Rowling again, that she was going to use this opportunity to say that she always loved J.K. Rowling. Despite the fact that for the last 5 years, none of that happened. Now, all of this could have kind of maybe a little bit happened quietly. You know, she does this interview. It's a small excerpt that she talks about her wanting to like Jo, and don't worry, we'll watch it obviously in a second. But then J.K. Rowling decides to respond to this. And J.K. has been quite quiet about all this, okay? She hasn't made as much of a public spectacle about it as she could. Stayed quiet. And where it gets interesting is that her tweet, which we'll read out, received 41 million views, okay? And J.K. Rowling just absolutely destroys Emma Watson. Let's watch what Emma had to say and why J.K. needed to respond.
I really don't believe that by having had that experience and holding the love and support and views that I have mean that I can't and don't treasure Jo and the person that I had personal experiences with. I will never believe that one negates the other, and that my experience of that person I don't get to keep and cherish. To come back to our earlier thing, like, I just don't think these things are either or. I think it's my deepest wish that I hope people who don't agree with my opinion will love me, and I hope I can keep loving people who I don't necessarily share the same opinion.
Okay, so if you're watching that, you're like, wow, she's such a deep, beautiful, kind person who just really loves people with differences of opinions. But if you've been watching anything that she's been saying over the last 10 years, you just know it's not true. And so J.K. Rowling decided, you know what? I've just had enough. This woman's now 30 years old. She's no longer a child. We are going to respond to this. Again, 41 million views on this response. And it's fantastic, as only J.K. Rowling would know how to do. I'm seeing quite a bit of comment about this, and I want to make a couple of points. I'm not owed eternal agreement from any actor who once played a character I created. The idea is as ludicrous as me checking with the boss I had when I was 21 for what opinions I should hold these days. Emma Watson and her co-stars have every right to embrace gender identity ideologies. Such beliefs are legally protected, and I wouldn't want to see any of them threatened with loss of work or violence or death because of them. However, Emma and Dan, in particular, have both made it clear over the last few years that they think our former professional association gives them a particular right, nigh obligation, to critique me and my views in public. Years after they finished acting in Potter, they continue to assume the role of de facto spokesman for the world I created. When you've known people since they are 10 years old, it's hard to shake a certain protectiveness. Until quite recently, I hadn't managed to throw off the memory of children who needed to be gently coaxed through their dialogue in a big, scary film studio. For the past few years, I've repeatedly declined invitations from journalists to comment on Emma specifically, most notably on the witch trials of J.K. Rowling. a film that Emma featured in. Ironically, I told the producers that I do not want her to be hounded as the result of anything I said. Once again, J.K. Rowling be an absolute legend. The television presenter in the attached clip highlights Emma's all witches speech, and in truth, that was a turning point for me. But it had a proscript that hurt far more than the speech itself. Emma asked someone to pass on a handwritten note from her to me, which contained the single sentence, "I'm so sorry for what you're going through." Remember, she has my phone number. This was back when death, rape, and torture threats against me were at their peak, at a time when my personal security measures had to be tightened considerably, and I was constantly worried for my family's safety. Emma had just publicly poured more petrol on the flames, yet thought a one-line expression of concern from her would reassure me of her fundamental sympathy and kindness. Okay? So now we hear that, like, whilst Emma's out there filming this documentary or whatever, fanning the flames like crazy against the hatred that J.K. Rowling's experienced, and she, boy oh boy, has experienced a huge amount of hatred the last few years. I mean, immense and enormous. She wrote her a one-sentence note, okay, saying, "I'm so sorry for what you're going through." I mean, okay? Like other people who've never, this is where JK just decides, you know what, it's time to go off. It's just time to put Emma in her place. Keep in mind, years that J.K. Rowling has just defended and not said anything negative about Emma Watson, despite being harassed constantly for everything that Emma has been saying. Like other people who've never experienced adult life uncushioned by wealth and fame, Emma has so little experience of real life, she's ignorant of how ignorant she is. She'll never need a homeless shelter. She's never going to be placed on a mixed-sex public hospital ward. I'd be astounded if she's been in a high school changing room since childhood. Her public bathroom is a single occupancy and comes with a security man standing guard outside the door. Has she had to strip off a newly mixed-sex changing room at a council-run swimming pool? Is she ever likely to need a state-run rape crisis center that refuses to guarantee an all-female service? To find herself sharing a prison cell with a male rapist who's identified into the women prisons? Okay, I mean, look, Jake is going at it. She's going at it, and she's calling Emma Watson out, and she's like, you stand up for transgender rights, but you have no idea what this is. And now, obviously, JK responds to the most obvious thing, which is like, J.K. Rowling, you're a millionaire, why are you saying this? I wasn't a multi-millionaire at 14. I lived in poverty while writing the book that made Emma famous. I therefore understand from my own life experiences what the trashing of women's rights, in which Emma has so enthusiastically participated, means to women and girls without her privileges. The greatest irony here is that had Emma decided to not decide in her most recent interview to declare that she loves and treasures me, a change of tack I suspect she adopted because she's noticed full-throated condemnation of me is no longer quite as fashionable as it was, I would never have been this honest. Adults can't expect to cozy up to an activist movement that regularly calls for a friend's assassination, then assert their right to the former friend's love as though the friend was in fact their mother. Emma is rightly free to disagree with me and indeed to discuss her feelings about me in public. But I have the same right, and I have finally decided to exercise it. I mean, guys, that deserves a standing ovation in my opinion. And let's just repeat this, because I think this summarizes everything that we're seeing right now with a Palestinian, with a lefty, with a wokey, with the crazies. Adults can't expect to cozy up to an activist movement that regularly calls for a friend's assassination, then assert their right to the former friend's love as though the friend was in fact their mother. Emma is rightly free to disagree with me and indeed to discuss her feelings with me in public, but I have the same right, and I have finally decided to exercise it. Good for you, J.K. Rowling, as somebody who has been so honorable throughout this entire thing, where the transgender world has just come at her and made a literal witch hunt of trying to bring J.K. down because of the things that she says, which are just fair, trying to protect women's rights. Because again, the transgender movement is nothing short of trying to remove women's rights. That's what they do. They'll have you believe that, no, it's about protecting people who have gender complications. No, it's not. That is not what's going on. There are many, 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 many ways to protect transgender people, which don't include destroying of women's rights to be able to be safe. And JK has championed that. And Emma Watson is being eviscerated online because, look, here's the truth. It doesn't look good to be weak and to try and pander to gain favor. It doesn't look good to get an interview and be like, oh, I just love her, when everybody can see the opposite. And I'm telling you guys that this is what is going to happen in the future with everybody that is hated on the Jews. The Jews in Israel are just going to rise and rise and rise, and all of our haters are just going to fall and fall and fall. That is what's going to happen. We know that that's what happens. So keep an eye on it. Remember this. Remember the fact that people don't like people who wish-wash, who change, who pretend that they're something when everybody can see the evidence that they're not. The world is coming after Emma Watson, and although it's regrettable because she was beautiful and a great actress, I have to say this time she kind of deserves it. And good for J.K. Rowling for finally speaking up for herself and saying, hey woman, don't pretend that we're friends. We are not friends. Don't make this sound as if J.K. Rowling is the problem one here, the one who can't really reward love in return to Emma Watson. Emma, you did this all entirely to yourself. Adults, take responsibility. If you're going to hate on people and then try and get away with it when it makes you uncomfortable, you're going to pay the price. Thank you for your attention to this matter.